Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our introduction to terpenes and the entourage effect. It's going to be kind of casual today and not anything real formal. I do have some slides that I'm going to speak to, but I think this is a fairly new area for all of us, and it's an area we want to continue to explore with our affiliates. And so let's get started and talk a little bit about what are terpenes. So terpenes are molecules within flowers. It could be flowers, it could be cannabis, it could be several different types of botanical growths that are extremely small, but they create the unique smell and effects of each flower, and they're the primary molecules of that matter. So just think of them as very, 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 very small aromatic molecules that also have an effect, a very positive effect in some cases negative effect. I would imagine somewhere poison ivy is not a good terpene to get involved with, has terpenes in it that are not good. A lot of the terpenes, the original thought is that was to deter herbivores or distract predators or parasites, fight off parasites. And it was used to resist those, whether or not, again, whether it be an adverse effect or whether it just be the aroma. But we're not here really to talk about that today. I mean, they're fragrant and all that, but really what we're talking about is the healing benefits of these terpenes within these flowers. And I know everybody knows we're familiar with CBD, and everybody loves CBD. Everybody knows my story and my amount of use of CBD, but it's only one of the components responsible for the positive effects of hemp and cannabis overall. Terpenes have shown to be a part of that, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So that it's not just about CBD. CBD is great; it has a lot of real positive effects. But to really maximize the effects, terpenes have to be considered. So first, let's talk about something we've mentioned before, and it's the entourage effect. And it really describes the synergy and relationship between terpenes and cannabinoids and other compounds that are within a plant. And you can look at it basically that the whole is greater than the individual parts. I mean, you have CBD, and that's great, and you have terpenes, and that's great. But working together, they give you the entourage effects, which maximizes both their properties and really gives you the most bang for your buck. And yes, like I said, THC has its effects, CBD has its positive effects, but without the other aspects of the plant, like terpenes, you don't really, even those compounds don't really achieve their maximum benefit. It really is all about working together. Cannabinoids, and terpenes both affect the receptors, and in some ways the terpene kind of modulates or controls the effect of the cannabinoid. So really working together again is really the maximum benefit, or the entourage effect that everybody is talking about. And lastly, when you think about it, people that are involved with cannabis, that either take it medically for medicinal purposes or they take it for recreational purposes, different types of cannabis have different effects. Some will make you have one particular effect. Maybe it makes you tired. Maybe it makes you hungry. Maybe it makes you up. Maybe it makes you down. And those really all are impacted and differentiated by the terpene profiles. We're going to get into that a little bit. But as we go through this, let's think about the different terpene profiles and how they relate into specific situations that someone may have. So first, how can we use terpenes? Well, first of all, there are over 200 terpenes in plants. Now, that's quite a few, but 25 are really the main ones, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But each one of these, again, has their own special properties and own special benefits. And that is really important when we think about terpenes and using them to combine with CBD to maximize the effect on someone's wellness, but yet what are their issues? What are they trying to solve? So that is really important when you look at the terpenes and pay attention to those kinds of special benefits. Even though terpenes can be individually isolated, whether it be beta-caryophyllene or whether it be alpha-pinene or several others, they can be individually isolated. But not typically, always, there are multiple terpenes available in each plant. So like in the example to the right, you can see that a couple of terpenes are the main players in ACDC, which is a strain of cannabis. But there are a lot of other smaller players that are also part of that. So again, by identifying which terpenes address the situation, cannabis can be used to get the desired effect. So if one terpene is good, for example, if one terpene is good for someone's wellness and helps them, provides a benefit, and a strain has a lot of that. A good example is copaiba, actually. Copaiba, which you may know, is essential oil sold by doTERRA that has an awful lot, I think it's almost 50%, if not 50%, of beta-caryophyllene. And that specifically addresses inflammation, pain, and those are the characteristics of beta-caryophyllene. So that copaiba, when using copaiba for a situation, like Margie, my wife, she'll add it to her CBD, or she'll use it in conjunction. She doesn't actually add it to the CBD, but she uses it in conjunction with CBD because she has certain inflammation and it has other properties as well. So again, backing up, when you start to look at, and these descriptions are provided by SC Labs, which is a testing lab. When you look at some of these primary terpenes, you can read things like under alpha-pinene, the last sentence, anti-inflammatory and a bronchodilator. A bronchodilator. When you look at Lionol, it says anti-epileptic, So, or an anesthetic. So, if you look down at these different primary terpenes, and you see what characteristics they have, like the geranol, which comes from geraniums. When you look at that, it has a real positive effect against neuropathy. So somebody who is having some type of system, and all this is just data provided by, it's not FDA approved information, but it is very, very, I can't think of the word, but this is, again, comes from SC Labs. But the symptom or the issue that someone is having can be tied directly back to a terpene. And then that terpene then can be used in conjunction with CBD to get the entourage effect. And so what you're doing really is developing a solution for someone based upon the primaries of the terpenes in conjunction with CBD. And it's really a great tool. If you would like a copy of this presentation, just let me know. I'll be happy to send it to you. But it's a great way to help somebody who is having specific issues. There are a lot of secondary terpenes that we're not, that we don't really address really kind of up front. But again, combined with all these primaries and these secondaries and smaller portions of the primaries, they give you a lot of general benefits, again, focused on the higher percentages for exactly the situation, the person or you are dealing with. So there's just some more, and again, this is all available on SC Labs. So I want to talk about another subject that always rings everybody's bell, and that's cannabis derived terpenes. So naturally, the situation here is that when we look at various strains of cannabis, which are easily identified, there are terpenes derived from those. And that's where we get those percentages and all that. That's really based upon strains of cannabis. And so that, and those profiles are available on True Terpenes. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, so that you can see a strain of cannabis, what terpenes are in it, what percentage of terpenes are in it, and then you can make a decision as to what strain of cannabis would be best for the situation that you or your client or friend or customer are dealing with. The key is not everybody wants to use the terpenes that are derived from cannabis. Some people prefer that they feel there's some THC in there, which there usually is some, but of course it's very low and it's below the limits that are regulated. But they still don't want to mess with it. They just don't want to mess with it at all. They just have an adverse, opinion of it. So True Terpenes, who we're going to again talk about a little later, what they do is they take that strain of cannabis and they look at the terpenes in it, and basically they reverse engineer it and develop the terpenes from actual botanical products or botanical plant sources. So and then there's absolutely no legal issue because it's botanical. And there's no THC. It's not from cannabis. It's directly from different flowers and different plants, like copaiba, for example, or geranium, or lemon, or a lot of different plants that have the terpenes in them. And so they reverse engineer that. But there are benefits and downside to each. And so this little chart I put together, it's kind of like, try to make it not favor one or the other. But the bottom line is that when you use cannabis, whatever that strain is, it's exactly that strain. I mean, there's no variation, there's no extraction from or translation to botanical setting. It is strictly that plant. So it's always going to be a little bit more accurate just because it is. It doesn't mean anything, or that it's more therapeutic, or that it's better. It just means that's what it is, and it's easy to use because it's similar to cannabis. I mean, it's just easy to get. You can digest it, you smoke it, whatever. It's just easier to get the terpenes. When you have to start reverse engineering things and then finding all these different plants to make up these compositions, it's a lot more work. So on one hand, you're just extracting it from the cannabis. On the other hand, you're kind of recreating it in a botanical form. So it is more work. The nice thing, though, about the pros on the non-cannabis derived terpenes is, number one, they have the highest purity. You're not taking it from a plant without distilling it. It's steam distilled and created from the plants. It has the highest purity. You know what you're measuring, whereas maybe in a plant, it's not exact. You're just taking what you get. It's more cost effective because cannabis is much more expensive than lemons, for example. It's legal, can ship it anywhere. It's never an issue, never any problem, and it's very consistent because it's scientifically created, it's measured, it's produced, and it's more accurate. And then the R&D, overall, the product is much less expensive. I've tried both at this point to experiment around, and I can tell you, you get for not a lot of money, relatively speaking, but for a significant amount of money of the cannabis, you get very little. And for the same amount of money for the non-cannabis, you get a lot more. So some would argue, and I don't know, I tried to figure out whether the cannabis is actually a little more potent. I really couldn't prove that. So I think you probably end up better off financially, as well as all these other reasons with that, with the botanical based. But there are disadvantages to both. The cannabis, it can it's not standardized. It's not it's not as scientific. It's kind of like go from the seat of your pants. It can have water in it, and that can cause bacteria, and it can be a little more harsh than whether someone is vaping it or whether someone is swallowing it. It could be a little more harsh. And what makes it so expensive is getting the terpenes out of the cannabis is there's very little there. It's 10 to times 20 as much, as they say. We talked a lot about that. Waste a lot of money if it's spilled. Hey, that's kind of not the best reason not to do it, because you just need to be more careful. On the other side, it's a little. Some of the cons is it's a little stronger flavor because you're taking it directly from the plants, and you can't always capture 100% of the scent, especially of cannabis, if that's something you like. Some people don't care. I did get some isolates, which we'll talk a little bit about yesterday, that are botanical based, and Margie and I were smelling them, and they smell great. So it all depends on what your taste is. So the next question, everybody always wants to know is, are terpenes safe? And they're very, very safe when used properly. So like any other thing, if you misuse them, then they're not safe. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Purity is obviously extremely important when you're either ingesting or you're applying it topically. No matter, whatever you're doing, even vaping, a lot of people vape terpenes, but purity is really important. If it says things like do not inhale, do not ingest, that's, the purity is not there, and it's very, very risky. All the terpenes we support and we talk about are all 100% organic, and they're all approved to be taken internally. That said, isolates, which we're going to describe in a minute, are dangerous and are very strong, not necessarily from a potency, but from a lot of characteristics. They have some alcohol properties, and alcohol from a flammable standpoint. So you have to be very careful, but you don't ever have to get the concentrated isolates. I did get them, like I said, a couple days ago. But prior to that, I had been using the strains, the various strains of marijuana or cannabis that have been translated into botanicals. I've been using those, and those come ready to use out of the bottle. You don't have to do anything. They are concentrate. You just have to follow but you could take them technically directly in small, like a drop or two here or there. I add them to the CBD, which then dilutes them. But in the end, we were doing some calculations today. It ends up being maybe 1 to 2 drops per serving of the terpenes that go with the CBD. So you could take that directly. But as always, as we always say, you shouldn't take anything, especially if you have a medical condition, without your doctor knowing about it, without their consent, getting input. And, at very high concentrations, there can be some issues, which we talked about before. It has to be properly diluted, which it comes again in strains self-diluted. But in the isolates, you have to be careful. And that's why, today for example, I had purchased 2 isolates, alpha-pinene and beta-caryophyllene. And we ended up doing the calculations on the website, and it turned out to be in a 2-ounce bottle of 600 CBD pure pure CBD. We ended up putting in, I ended up putting in about 40 drops of each. So 80 drops to a 2-ounce bottle. And that'll give me about 1.5 drops per serving is what we figured. And always you should read the material and the safety information before you use anything, put anything into your body or onto your body. So moving along. So strains versus isolates. I've talked a little bit about this. A little bit about my situation. Again, there are several strains of cannabis for people who know or marijuana. And those strains have names, and those names have profiles of terpenes. So when you look at a strain, and this again, information is very, very easy, very easy to find on True Terpenes. And I'll give you some links at the end. But so if you look at these strains of marijuana and their profiles, you can see which profile best fits your solution you're looking for. For me, it was pain and inflammation. I found AC/DC and Pineapple Express, which are goofy names of marijuana strains, to be pretty good. And then also Girl Scout cookie, which I didn't buy, but I actually plan to test that as well. So these were the strains that had the most pain and inflammation mention or identification. And there are a lot of areas within True Terpenes where you can see there's a selection for pain, and there's charts that which represent which are good for which. This is part of the reason, by the way, that Margie and I decided to work with True Terpenes. And when I say work, we're not really working that closely, but recommend or suggest or use them as a takeoff point, because they have so much information on their website to educate you and give you information about which terpenes work with which and which provide which benefits. It's just an excellent site. It's also called Buy-Terpenes, but you can look it up. But if you go through the link we provide, it's the best, most information available. So again, the strains are different profiles of terpenes. The strains of marijuana or kinds of marijuana, they're just identified that way and used to be able to reverse engineer into those profiles. Those strains are mixtures of different terpenes. Then you can buy isolates, which, as I described before, just a specific terpene. They're usually stronger, usually need a little more handling, a little more concentrated. So you have to be a little careful. And I really don't recommend starting out with isolates, because you want to kind of get a feel for how this is going to work for you and get a little more comfortable with it before you start doing the isolates. The isolates are a little more, need a little more hand holding, a little more experience. Not that I'm so experienced. But so I recently switched over, and I'm trying those because I really wanted to focus on those, because my main issue is my pain, which has been just unbelievable. I didn't, those of you who know, I have a stimulator in my back. I didn't even have it on yesterday. It's like crazy how well this stuff is working for me. Especially the CBD was working great. But I had the same kind of pain as I did with when I was still taking the opioids. Now I'm not having any pain that isn't really manageable, and I'm not taking anything but CBD and terpenes. So anyway, but this whole experiment with this for me personally with the isolates, the jury's still out. I don't know yet. I just got it yesterday. I haven't even tried it yet. I did the mixture today, and we'll be trying it later on. True Terpenes, I talked a little bit about them. We do recommend them. Their terpenes are food grade and organic. They don't contain any kind of artificial flavors. They provide an analysis of the terpene strains, great information. Like I said, a huge wealth of information on their website. Their products are third-party tested. They don't misbrand or do anything that wouldn't be considered a violation of anything. And their site is certified to meet all the criteria and you can visit True Terpenes. There's a link I'll be happy to send out. Or if you get this presentation, you can click on the link, and I really suggest that you download it. So the presentation. So again, True Terpenes is really a great site. So that's about it for terpenes. You know, I don't want to take a lot of your time tonight. I just want to kind of introduce the whole thing about terpenes. I would like for you to play around a little bit with the site and with the idea, and start thinking about it. I'm always available for questions. If you have any input of like, oh, this person has this, which terpene do you think would be best? We can look at the information together and try and identify which might be best. And overall see how you can start to, if you choose, incorporate this into your sales process or just as a user, and to help yourself with any issues that you might have. But it is, you know, the Entourage Effect is, I can testify that it definitely makes a difference. And it makes a difference when combining the CBD. We have the finest CBD available. I believe that 100%. And many of you know we now have also CBD soft gels, 750 milligram. And I think that comes to about 25 per dose per day versus 20 of the 600. And for those of you who don't like liquid, you can do that. And then if you want to do the terpenes on top of that, you would just have to take a couple drops. You could either add it to a beverage, or you could put it under your tongue, which of course would be the best. But yeah, it's really the way to go, and it really does improve the overall performance of both products and both solutions, and really provides a great benefit. So again, feel free to email me at marty@holisticlife.com with any questions or comments, or if you want to set up just a little phone discussion, just drop me a line and we'll pick a good time. Okay, I want to thank you very much, and have a good evening, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.